I'm doing a little tutorial on PSS solo violin in advance of the walkthrough. I haven't decided if the walkthrough is going to have narration yet, but I wanted to do this at least for Instagram, and I'll cross-post it to the business account. So there's a little feature that I'm adding in these new libraries I did, and it's info. So if you look down here, you can see when I'm hovering my mouse over different things, you can see a little explanation of how it works. And I didn't go in a huge amount of detail, but I went into enough that you should have some idea. And then I do plan to fill in with some info on the product pages and the description, talking about different controls a little more in depth. But in terms of this feature, um, you have to turn this on here. Just click on info, make sure that's on. And then when you hover, you get some answers to basically like description to different controls. So one or a couple things I want to talk about here, the Sforzando release, this is pretty subtle, quite subtle actually. And it's basically when you're playing a really fast Sforzando, loud to soft, it will trigger um, a sample which kind of allows it to not suck the room out, to suck the ambience out of what you're doing, so to speak. So that's just a really small feature, but I think some people might find it helpful. And then I want to talk about, okay, sample offset. So sample offset is locked on most things, but I still wanted to show the number. So the reason it's locked, and there's a reason, well, I guess there could be multiple reasons for it, but functionally, say on legato, violin legato, or any like soul string legato, I do I use like flex envelopes. I use envelopes like that. I don't use scripted crossfades. So there's specific times they have to fade over, especially with solo strings. Timbrely, if I just fade at 800 milliseconds versus at 1,000 milliseconds, there's going to be problems because it's kind of very carefully matched on a per interval basis. So there's a lot of complexities with that. And so that's one of the reasons sample offset's locked on, say, legatos. Um, and the sample offset, another thing that I should always mention is that it's always based on the closest mic. Sample offset, the number you see, the numbers I'm using in marketing for these libraries, it's based off the closest mic. So that's 180 milliseconds to the closest mic, not to the section mic, to the closest mic. And that can be a little bit confusing. I mean, I like to use more ambient mics. You have to do your, compensation for that, um, to kind of approximate the difference. But the 180 is to the closest mic, and then usually there's varying degrees of differences between the mics as they get, they're mid distance and then far distance. And okay, the last thing I want to talk about is these four controls. So controlling different types of intervals on this patch. And there's slurred, there's bow change, and there's portamento. By default, I had the bow change turned off, so it's way up here. And portamento is occupying the lowest part of the range. So in this case, bow change won't be triggering, but portamento will be triggering on the lower velocities, and other than that, you're just playing slurred. So some people prefer portamento on higher velocities, so they could do something like this. Um, and maybe you want bow change on low velocities, so you could have it like this, and then whatever level of sensitivity you want. So between 1 and 30, 1 and 40, it's up to you. So that's a little tutorial on the solo violin legato.